Hi team, welcome to my session on Coffee with Prab, and today we're going to discuss about my next video of my ISO 27001 series. And in this video we're going to discuss about how to create a policies and how to create a roles responsibility matrix document according to clause 5.1. In my previous video we discussed about gap assessment, and once we're in the gap assessment we prepare the business case to the management about that, and after that we start implementing a control. So what should be the first control we're going to implement? That is going to be discussed in this particular video. My name is Prab Nair. For more information you can check my LinkedIn profile, and make sure you can check my one end-to-end video which I got huge success in 2 months, 20k view, because in that video I have discussed end-to-end implementation of 27001, and this is the part of that video only where I'm going to explain each and every step in detail. So if you're new to the channel, do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss my future videos on a similar topic. So without wasting a time, let's start with the first part. Thank you. Okay, so after doing a gap assessment, as I said, the first thing we have to do to check what is the next clause we have to follow. So we did the scoping, we did the gap assessment, and we prepare the reports and provide to the management. So we're going to follow clause number 5. So under the 5, we have leadership and commitment, we have information security policy, and we have our organization roles and responsibility. Okay, it's not clause 5.1, I'm talking about 5 only. So clause 5 have a 3 clauses, which is called clause 5.1 in leadership and commitment, 5.2 called information security policy, and clause 5.3 is organization roles, responsibility, and authority. So one thing you need to understand as an action plan: after completing the gap assessment, you should first develop the information security policy, because to set up any kind of a governance, even you don't want to do the risk assessment, you need to first create a security governance there. And without policy, you can't drive any kind of a information security in the organization. It is same like any kind of a program you want to introduce, you need a law in the country, right? Example, in India, if you want to introduce GST as a system, you need a law behind that. Same like any kind of a program you want to introduce, it should be backed and supported by the policy. So policy is a foundation. So I have seen a lot of people get confused in this area, that what is the first step after doing a gap assessment. So first we need to create a policy, because without policy we cannot drive anything, and it is just like a leadership commitment actually. Okay, it is just like a leadership commitment. So when you're talking about the policy, so we have a clause 5.1 which say leadership and commitment. So they focus on that we need to have a ISMS for the improvement, and leadership commitment is essential for the effectiveness and success of ISMS. Just like a email approval of implementing ISMS, it shows the leadership commitment, right? That is there. Along with that, the top management here can be senior management board, who giving a budgetary approvals of all the initiatives, and their active involvement support the mandatory for ISO 27001 compliance. Even when auditor come for an audit and all that, he asks for the policy approval emails as an evidence. He asks for the ISMS scope approval as a document from the leadership as an email record. So these kind of email records reflect the management commitment. So the question is, what is the best practice? How to get the commitment? See, best practice is visible commitment. So top management should visibly participate in the ISMS activity. But the question is how? By minutes of meeting records. Okay, email record approvals on a timely basis, which is their due care and due diligence. Second is schedule the periodic meeting to discuss the ISMS progress, capture that as a minutes of meeting, and their approvals of the mail are the documentation. So if you can able to produce this kind of a documents, it shows the clause 5.1 requirement of ISMS 27001. Now when we say leadership commitment, which is a clause 5.1, see, information security policy should comply with the strategic goals and all that. That something is a most important part. And it's very important you have to integrate the ISMS into the business process and ensure resources are available. One example is like companies going for vendor management process. So we have to make sure when we onboard the vendor, we do proper risk assessment, right? That something is a very important part. Then third is communicate the importance of ISMS and track the performance, so which is include the metrics and everything. And along with that, we also need to ensure we support the employees in contributing the ISMS. So we look for the meeting records and all that. So this is how you can able to track the functions. Now next thing is called as a policy. Policy is always strategic in nature, and as per clause 5.2, we require top management to establish the information security policy that meet the specific criteria. See, in some companies, they have one information security policy which capture all the controls of ISMS, or you can have a one high level information security policy which talk about what is information security, what is the role of management toward the information security policy, which is also called as a ISMS policy. Now, to understand policy, before I discuss from the ISO 27000 point of view, I want to give you a kind of awareness. What is policy? So let's say example, every system must be protected with the password. That is called policy. But the question is why we create a policy. See, let's say example, we have a legal requirement. We have a business requirement. So what is the importance of senior management is that senior management interpret the business, they interpret the legal requirement. Is it clear? So they interpret the legal requirement, they interpret the business requirement, and their goal is that whoever working on the operation level, which is like people, process and technology, they wish to comply with that. So first thing, they create a policy. Okay, that's where the policy is the foundation of any governance. If any company does not have a policy, that demonstrates they don't have a good governance. So policy is just like a law of the country. You can imagine without law, if how the country is going to work. Same like policy is a foundation for any company. So here the example is every system must be protected with a password. So that is called as a policy. Now we need to follow across people, process, technology. The second thing, we introduce a standard. Now here I'm not talking standard is 27001. Standard is just an English word. Standard mean what is uniform across the policy. So we say 8 character password should be uniform across all the system. The next is how to follow the standard. So we create a procedures which is include detailed step-by-step process. Okay, and then we implement in the organization. So policy enforce your strategy and then through that we create a program. So that's why we say policy is the foundation of any organization. Okay, so the practical tips is that we need to make sure when you're creating a policy, involve all the stakeholders. I'm going to show you the demo how the policy should be right. So it is very important, involve all the business team and take their inputs, create a policy, submit the policy for an approval to the management. And once the management approve the policy, then we update the policy and we communicate the policy to everyone. Sometimes policy have a scoping also. This policy applicable for India, the policy is applicable for US, and we also define the authority. So the first thing here is develop and implement the policy. Now question is, what should be the content in the policy? The policy should have objectives. It should have a compliance commitment. It should have a continual improvement, and make sure policy should be signed off by the management. So let me show you an example how to write policy and what should be the ideal content of the policy. So as I promise, my every video should have a practical. So first important thing in the policy is that you should define the heading. That's the most important part. So same thing, document classification internal, version should be 1. I'm just giving example, date and document owner. It's very important. You need to have this for the integrity purpose. Now, this is the one table. We have a revision history. If you're going to update the policy, you have to update the revision history for the integrity purpose. Distribution list, approval, you need this, okay? Otherwise, the NC. Then table of content. In my second video, I've explained you how to create this table of content, okay? Now, when you're talking about your policy should have these content: purpose, scope, information security, objectives, commitments, roles, responsibility, approach, policy, communication, process, review and update. Again, I'm telling you, can be modified as per need. It's not necessary you need to have same content, but at least purpose, scope, information security, objectives, and risk management and policy communication process and review, it's mandatory to have to pass the audit. Okay, so first we have a policy ka purpose. Now the one thing is that this document is different from other documents because I'm going to explain you why I have this content in this policy. So you can see every policy start with the purpose, because without purpose it is difficult to define the policy. So they say why we have, so clause 5.2 required policy to be clearly state, and question is what to include. So the purpose of the section explain why information security is important. So every policy, when it start with the content. Here you can see the purpose of information security policy to protect the ISMS, because policy called as a why in the organization. When we introducing any kind of initiative, policy talk about why we need this. So that is why purpose is very important. Why? Because 5.2 clearly state purpose has to define, and purpose should explain why information security important. This is the content of that purpose. Now second part called as a scopes. After purpose, second part we required scope, because 4.3 says 27th required you to define the scope of ISMS. So what is included in the scope is scope session define which assets, business process and department cover under the ISMS. So here you can see the policy applied to all the employers, contractor, third party vendors. It's up to you. You don't want to apply this on a contractor, you can remove that. If you think contractor is going to hold your PI information, third party vendor is going to hold PI information, so they are subject to your ISMS. So that is why in the scope you have to add this. Now listen carefully, okay? If you don't add the contractor and contractor hold the data, it is a non-compliant. So make sure in the policy you should include all the people who are processing of your sensitive data. And you can see here the policy applied to all the employees, stakeholders of Aspen Technology, and it cover all the organization operation. Now you want this policy for Noida, so you can specifically mention about the Noida. Okay, so that's why we have to define the scope. The third section, information security objectives. So that's the next thing we have. Why it's required? Because 6.2 clause say that we need to measure the information security objectives. So until unless you don't have the objective, we cannot able to track. Now question is what need to be included here. So we have to clearly state the security objective, how they will measure. So sample here is that, the primary objective of Aspen Technology are protect the sensitive information, ensure the accuracy, timely access of information, comply. This is something you can directly copy from the scope proposal, okay? And we giving explanation because this is how you're using this objectives as a matrix. Then commitment, because according to 5.2, ISMS policy include the commitment to satisfy the legal. So what to include? Your commitment from top management and statement of the commitment to improve the ISMS. So this is the commitment we have. Like it's up to you. You can have this commitment as an introduction of policy before purpose. But here we add this commitment after the purpose and scope. You can see Aspen Technology is committed to comply with legal regulatory. They demonstrate the ISMS regularly. And why it's required? Because audit will check the management commitment, not to justify implement the security. That's why we need to demonstrate the commitment. Now this section, we talk about the role of the management toward the policy. So 5.3, which is my next clause, mandate the ISMS policy define the role. So that's why in the policy we adding a role. What to include? Sample roles. It's up to you. You can have a separate policy for that. Okay. Or if you want to add in this, you can do that also. Why it's required? Because without clearly defined the roles, it is difficult to assign the accountability. Finally, how you're doing a risk management, that is also documented in the policy. Here you can see 6.1.2, which say organization establish risk assessment process, what to include, summarize. So your organization will conduct risk assessment on annual basis. You can have this in the same information security policy, or you can create the separate risk management policy. It's up to you. Okay. Then how to communicate the policy, 7.3, and describe the policy. Policy communicate to all the employees. They will ask the evidence. Auditor will ask for the evidence. Show me the evidence how you communicate it. So auditor will check if the policy has been communicated. They will ask for the random meeting of records. And finally, review and update and supporting process and procedure. One thing is missing here is the last part. We can add the version history, and we can also add the department and everything. So this is how you create the information security policy for the purpose. It's up to you. You can have, let me show you the table of content again. So if you see the table of content, okay, if you want to pass the audit and you want advocacy, purpose is enough, scope is enough, okay, where it is applicable, information security objectives enough, and policy communication is enough, and review and update process, and that's it. You can have a different policy for risk management, roles and responsibility can have a different policy, but at least to pass the audit, purpose is important, scope is important, information security objective is important, policy communication is important, review update process is important. That's the only thing is there. And if you're updating a policy, make sure you should update the version history. It's very important. If you don't update the version history and simply publish the policy, it is a non-compliance. Okay. So this is the one section we have. Now, once we implement the 5.2, we're going to implement the 5.3. 5.3, they say that you need to document all the roles and responsibility toward the information security. And we need to create one charter for that, CHARTER, charter document. So this clause emphasizes the clear definition of roles to ensure the effective function of ISMS. Now, when we're talking about the ISMS, we need some documents here. We need an organization chart. And this is the same chart that you collected during information gathering, responsibility metrics. It is good to have, but not mandatory, and employee awareness to make sure employee understand the roles and ISMS. So let's understand one important thing. See, I have seen a lot of people get confused with 5.1 to 5.3. So you need to understand one thing. There's a close integration we have of 5.1 to 5.3. Because 5.1 say leadership commitment, 5.3 say roles. So one thing you need to understand, top management active participation is 5.1 is very crucial for establishing a 5.2 definitely, and 5.3. So without 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 is not possible. Second is consistent communication from leadership is very important. Without commitment, we can't have a 5.2 and 5.3. And even to hire a resource in 5.3, which is called roles and responsibility, without leadership commitment is not important. So base is 5.1. Then we have a 5.2, and based on a policy, we can define the roles and responsibility. So overall implementation plan is, this is a very important slide and very interesting slide. So please listen this carefully. Okay. The first is that when we're talking about, you need to engage the top management. So you can educate them on 27,001 requirement and obtain the formal commitment to support the ISMS. Second is develop information security policy. You involve the stakeholder, get the policy approval from the management, then defines the roles and responsibility. Okay, assign the roles to qualified individual and ensures roles are documented, and make sure it should be integrated in the ISMS process. How? You can analyze the existing process and incorporate the ISMS requirement in that. Integrate the ISMS in the process, provide the resources like develop and deliver the training program, what is the budget, what is the person, what is the technology, all those things required. Promote the information security culture. How? Conduct the regular awareness, and top management should model the desired behavior, like their policy is like a culture. Monitor review with the help of metrics. So that's something is the most important part. So there are some challenges you should avoid, pitfalls to be avoided, bottleneck. First is that avoid using template without customization, grammatical and all that. So that's something is very important. Without management, policy is ineffective, so policy approval is required. Don't assume employees are aware of the policy without communication. So poor communication is another pitfall. And failing to review and update the policy can lead to become outdated. It's a very important part. Okay. It's a very important part. Now question is why we need a policy? Because policy help you to set the directions. And it is a very important thing to guide the risk assessment, because risk assessment based on the controls and everything. Okay. Second is by having a policy, we can able to demonstrate the management commitment. It's a starting point. And policy define the organization approach of managing a risk, and the tolerance level and framework is essential for conducting an effective risk assessment. And as per the audit, it is a mandatory requirement like 5.2, 27,001 we required, because information security should be established, implement, maintain. So auditor will expect to see policy as a foundational document. That's a very important part. Now question is why, now there is a question always receives, why we develop policy before risk assessment? Because policy is a control. Okay, and control we can do based on risk assessment. You need to understand one thing, risk assessment is a core function of information security. And if someone said tomorrow, why are we doing this? So we need to say, okay, we have an information security governance. That is why we're doing a risk assessment. That's why we say, why develop the policy before risk assessment? Because policy ensure risk assessment align with the goals and security objectives. The first thing. And one more important thing, it helps you to establish the risk criteria. Okay, because your risk appetite, your risk acceptance, all those things define in the policy. Third, it also provides the guidance to conduct a risk assessment, which provide the consistency. And by having a policy, you can able to demonstrate the commitment to stakeholders. So remember one thing, information security policy serve as a foundation for your ISMS, and conducting a risk assessment without establishing a policy could lead to the misalignment. So sequence of the step after gap assessment is develop the action plan. In my previous video, we discussed gap assessment, establish the policy, draft, obtain approval, and then define the roles and responsibility. And once you're done with that, then you will do the risk assessment. Okay. Is it clear? And then after that, you will go for the risk assessment, define the risk identified, conduct the risk assessment, and then you develop the risk treatment plan. So in my and prepare the SOA. So in my next video, I'm going to explain about the risk treatment plan and risk assessment, how to do risk assessment, what are the different type of risk assessment. So, but now let me show you how to comply with clause 5.3, because we need to have in 5.3 organization roles and responsibility charter. So let me show you how it look like. Okay, so this is the next document that we create in the clause 5, which is called roles and responsibility. We can say it is more like a roles and responsibility charter. Okay, again the same heading you have to give in. Document classification is there, revision history, content. Now here you can see content is purpose, scope, roles and responsibility, authority, competency, training, review and responsibility, and documented control. So first is purpose. As I said, the purpose document to define roles and responsibility. Whatever the roles we have in your company, okay, you have to document there. Where it applicable, you can give the name. And then we have a senior management, their roles and responsibility, why we required. And this is not you need to add, okay, it is just for your knowledge I add this, okay, why we need this 2.4, because auditor will verify the leadership is actively involved in the ISMS. Okay, so we have to give the specific responsibility from ISMS point of view. Then we have an information security manager. He is the one who implement. Okay, why it is required, because specific roles to be assigned. Then we have a risk officer. It is not mandatory, not every company has a risk officer. You can add this as an information security officer, information security manager. IT manager, because technical controls will be implemented by IT manager, that's why we need to add this role. Then HR manager, because as per the annexure A.7.1, which is a mandatory requirement, and clause 7.2, we need a HR manager. And we also have a department head, 5.3, everyone in the organization with ISMS goals. So department heads are required, all employee, because it required as per the 7.3. Then competency training is required. Why it required? Because clause 7.2 say the person have necessary competence to perform the roles, and auditor will check if the staffs are adequately trained to manage the information security risk. Then we have a review roles responsibility, 9.3, which is a management review. So management should review the responsibility part, and document control is control under the ISMS document management system, which is 7.5. So you can see each and every content I have specified because there is a clause mentioned. Now what you can do is that you can have, now it's, see, when it comes to clause 5, okay, when it comes to the clause 5, so let me explain something. When you're talking about the clause 5, okay, so you need to have some 4 to 5 documents, which is mandatory for passing the certification audit. The one, you need a ISMS manual. ISMS manual, that's a one thing. Second is the roles and responsibility document charter. Third, you need a executive support letter, not mandatory, but email evidence of scope approval is enough. Then information security policy, mandatory requirement to pass the audit, and minutes of meetings. Minutes of meeting, MOM. So these are the 5 documents. Now it's up to you. You want to create a separate individual file, or you can take the content from all the, like, what is manual? You need to understand ISMS manual is nothing. What is in your ISMS? So that capture in the manual. Okay. So when we're talking about the manual define about how the information security manual will be set up, manage, measure and report it. Okay. That is the manual we called. So in manual include your content of leadership commitment. Okay. Same you can copy paste from the scope. Then roles and responsibility only you have to document. Okay. We need a roles and responsibility. That's it. Then what was the procedure for your continual improvement to your ISMS, and what is the way to approach the manager. So everything you can take from one section and you can add. And then what is the role of human resource, how you going to audit, how to control the documents, everything will be captured in the ISMS manual. ISMS manual is nothing. It is talk about what is included in the ISMS. That's it. It is just talk about how you going to manage the ISMS. That's it. Okay. So in my next video, I'm going to explain about how to do risk assessment. What are the type of risk assessment we have, and we do one practical risk assessment process. Okay. Do let me know how do you find this video. Do you find something new? in ISMS, and what is that new? Let me know in the chat box. Okay, so next video is all about how to do risk assessment, how to create a risk treatment plan, and the further video will be prepare the SOA and prepare the final ISMS control. Okay, thank you so much for watching this video. I'm sure you will love this, and looking forward for the feedback and comments in the video. Okay, good day, bye.